Good morning. So, as we get started with this next unit, you've already looked at Old Faithful and estimating times between eruptions. And so you created a graph to display that, and you should have analyzed that graph and tried to determine, how you would represent how long you would expect to wait between eruptions. So after that, something you may have noticed or thought about during the whole process was finding a measure of center that would be appropriate for your data set based upon how you distributed your graph. So a lot of people, when they have done those graphs, they notice that, where the dots were the most often or where it occurred the most often. So these are all types of measures of center and spread. And you can represent many values in a data set using just one central number. And sometimes we call this the middle number or the median. Okay. Or we call it the average or the mean. These are two measures of center. Okay. Center. So how do you find the mean? Well, again, going back to these are all things that you have previously learned, but the mean is finding the average. Well, how do you find the average? So our first step is going to be to find the sum of all of your values or numbers, okay? So once you've found the sum of all of those values, in order to take an average, you will need to divide by the quantity of numbers that you have. So once you've divided, you should have a number. Sometimes it will be a decimal, but that is going to be your average. So that is your mean. Well, another way of finding a measure of center would be the median. Okay. Usually we refer to this as being the middle number. Now the first thing you have to do when you're finding the median is listing your values from least to greatest. So once you've listed those values from least to greatest, all you have to simply do is find the middle number. Okay? So you're going to list the values from least to greatest and find your middle number. This is going to be really easy if you have an odd number in your data set. But if you have an even number, we'll talk about that in a second. So I want you to pause this right here, and I want you to do example 1 that's given on your guide. I'll give you a few moments to do that. So at this point, you should have worked out this problem. And for the data set 6, 10, 8, 13, 29, and 5, we're going to find the mean and the median. So first of all, to find the mean, you're going to need to find the sum of all of these numbers. So the sum ends up being 71. And the number of values that we have is 7. 71 divided by 7 is going to give us 10.14. Now let's find the median. In order to find the median, we need to put them in order from least to greatest. So we're going to start with 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 13, and 20. With our median being 9, because it is the middle number. Now again, going back, if the data set has two middle numbers, how do you find the median? Meaning there's an even amount of numbers in the data set. Well, you're going to take the average of the two middle values. Going back to what an average is, okay, you're going to find the sum and divide by numbers in set. So if you have two values, which if you have two middle numbers, you're going to find the sum of those two values and divide by 2. Okay, so now let's talk a little bit about spread. So we've talked about measures of center. Now let's talk about measures of spread. One of which is called the range. So the range is where you take the difference. Remember, in math, the difference is subtracting. You're going to find the difference between the max and the min, meaning your largest number and your smallest number. And you're just going to subtract those. So that is our range. Now, this is something you may not be as familiar with, and it's called the interquartile range. I'm just going to list this out on the next, the steps for finding the interquartile range on this next page. So we're looking for interquartile range, sometimes listed as IQR. Your first step for finding the interquartile range is going to be to find quartile number 1. In order to do that, you need to find the median of the lower half of your data set. So let's go back to our problem before we had, and this is in order, we have 5, 6, 8, 9. 10, 13, 20. Okay, so median of the lower half, this is an odd set of numbers. So where our median is, we could just draw 2 lines around our median, with 5, 6, 8 being our lower half and 10, 13, 20 being our upper half. Okay, so what is our median of our lower half? Well, that would be 6. So that is quartile 1. Now, quartile 2 is always going to be your median. And then, in order to keep finding the interquartile range, you will need to find quartile 3, which you probably have already assumed is the median of the upper half. Okay, 10, 13, 20 is our upper half. So our median of 10, 13, 20 is going to be 13. So that is quartile 3. So you've got your quartiles. You have quartile 1 being 6 and quartile 3 being 13. In order to find the interquartile range, you're going to subtract quartile 1 from quartile 3, the difference between quartile 3 and quartile 1. So in this case, it would be 13 minus 6. So 7 is your interquartile range. Okay, I would like for you to pause this here and go ahead and do example number 2. Okay, so very quickly we're going to go over this data set. So I'm just going to give you the answers for this to check yourself. And if you have any questions about how to do this, you can contact me or go back and watch the video. So our mean here is going to be 15.9. Our median being 14. Our range is 29. Our first quartile is 9. And our interquartile range is 13. Okay? And the question before it asked for the types of measures of spread in a data set. So we figured out they were range. That includes interquartile range. And something we're going to learn about later called standard deviation. And we will go into more detail about those later. All right, you guys have a wonderful day.